And welcome back. This is Alden Antonucci with Extreme Power Hour Podcast. And I've got a special guest with me, Tim Alberino, that probably a lot of people know, super popular on YouTube, I hear, especially about giants, Nephilim, a bunch of things like that, alternative medias. And there's a big thing that is happening right now, which is April 8th. So coming up in the next couple of days. And I know you've done some special shows about that and got a lot of details and insights on what's going on with the eclipse for April 8th. And I just want to kind of hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I suppose people should probably know that we're sitting in Bozeman, Montana.
Yep.
You and I are friends, and shout out to Ben Carter.
Yeah.
That's how we know each other, is through our mutual friend Ben Carter. So this is kind of you got your podcast going here, and I'm a friend in town, so we decided to talk about the eclipse.
Very cool.
Now, I'm actually more interested. The eclipse is a fascinating natural phenomenon. Obviously,
right.
It happens all the time. This is not. There are a couple of things that maybe make this eclipse unique, but it's pretty mundane as eclipses go. Eclipses have crisscrossed the United States before. Mm-hmm. Just in the 20th century, there have been numerous eclipses. So I would say right out of the gates here that there are things about this eclipse that make it more interesting perhaps than other eclipses in the past, but at the same time not as extraordinary as it's been made out to be on social media. Yeah. That would be my first statement on the eclipse.
And I'm sure you probably know a lot of the theories, a lot of rumors.
Yeah.
Do you think that's more of just spreading fear?
There's a lot of inaccuracies. There's a lot of fake news. So the reason why this eclipse is getting so much attention as opposed to other eclipses is because it's coinciding with some very interesting things.
Right. Do you have like a list of maybe?
It's coinciding with a vamping up of the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, with NASA sending rockets into the atmosphere during the eclipse to collect data in regard to the eclipse. The Totality, the shadow of the moon during Totality, passes over some interesting towns in the United States with some biblically oriented names.
Do you know how wide that path of Totality is?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's 115 miles wide.
Wow.
Right. So it's not like a pinstripe.
Right. It's not like a shadow laser beam.
It's not a laser beam exactly hitting these towns. It's a wide swath of area that shadow covers. The totality of the eclipse. One of the more interesting things is the fact that we're going to see a Cicada double brood event focused in Illinois this spring, which is, again, in and of itself extremely fascinating. There's going to be billions of cicadas popping out of the ground. And it's a double brood event, so you have the two different time frames that cicadas come up. They're coming up together.
Wow.
So that creates just that creates a very unique event. It's not unprecedented. It happens. The last time it happened was 221 years ago.
So what is that exactly?
I'm not going to try and get into the technical terms of what a cicada double brood event is, but it is very technical. But there's two different time frames when cicadas usually pop out of the ground.
Those are flowers?
No, those are insects.
Those insects?
Yeah, the ones that make the really loud chirping noise. And I think one is 17 years, one's 13 years, and they usually happen, they're staggered.
Right.
But every so often, 220 years since the last one, 221, they come out together. These two different groups, segregated, which are normally segregated groups, they pop out together. And so it's like this, it's like a mass event. All of the cicadas come out at once. Mm-hmm. So that's very intriguing to me.
Is that almost matched with maybe the plague of Egypt and kind of the lotus?
I don't know. It's it is interesting that these things are all coinciding.
Right.
You have, obviously potential World War III scenario unfolding in Ukraine, and Israel. And you have all this fanfare about the red heifer being prepared for the building of a new temple in Jerusalem. So all these things are sort of coalescing. They're all coalescing and creating a lot of hysteria. I think, as I keep saying, some of these things are very fascinating coincidences, but I'm very wary after COVID, after 2020. I'm going to try not to say anything that's going to get us banned on YouTube here, but after 2020, people and this is understandable, people understandably became more oriented and open to conspiracies.
Right.
Because we watched one play out in front of us in 2020. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to get into any more detail than that. We watched one play out with what unfolded. And so people, maybe a lot of people who were less prone to believing conspiracies became more open to them, and people who were already predisposed to believe in conspiracies became conspiracy obsessed.
Right.
After 2020. And so I coined a term, and I don't know if this term actually exists, but it's the way I think of it. It's conspiracy psychosis has set in since 2020. And this, I think, is a problem, and I see it on social media all the time, and it seems to be proliferating because of social media. Psychosis refers to a collection of symptoms that affect the mind, where there has been some loss of contact with reality. And I think that accurately describes some of what we're seeing now post-2020, that people are subscribing to every single conspiracy that shows up on their social media feed. And they're slowly and gradually losing touch with reality, losing contact with reality, so that everything is a conspiracy to them at this point. The faith in institutions is gone for these people, totally gone. So anything that, let's say, NASA says is automatically, axiomatically disbelieved just because it comes from that organization.
Right.
Or anything that comes out of the Pentagon is automatically disbelieved. Or anything that comes out of any institutionalized organization, there's this reaction to disbelieve but yet readily believe all the conspiracies on social media.
Right.
This is what I refer to as conspiracy psychosis. And so every now and again you get something that comes along and creates this contagious hysteria. And this is certainly one of those things, this solar eclipse event that's happening on the 8th, which is a very interesting event, but it's creating this social media hysteria. And whenever I see the social media hysteria kicking into gear and ramping up, I step back. I pump the brakes because I can see the psychosis. I detect it, and I know, what does that mean? That means that 50% of the information that's going to come through social media is going to be fake news. Mm-hmm. Why? Because every social media influencer who's trying to gain subscribers is going to jump on that bandwagon. And they're just going to keep repeating false information over and over and over and over and over, which, snowballs into this hysteria, and ultimately nothing happens. The date comes and goes, but the people who propagated that hysteria have 100, 200, 300, 400,000 more subscribers to their social media.
Right.
And that's what happens all the time. I've watched it happen so many times. And during the event we all passed through in 2020, which we shall not name, there were the people who were first out of the gates with the hysteria about that were dead wrong, and actually ended up disseminating Chinese communist propaganda. And these are, alternative history guys. These are alternative media guys. These are the prepper guys, and they ended up spreading Chinese communist propaganda. Okay, so that's why I'm always very curious, and certainly we are seeing conspiracy psychosis in regard to this eclipse. However, having said that, a lot of these things are very interesting. The and coincidental, perhaps.
Right.
When people look at the map of where the shadow of the moon is that line that we see all over social media now. That's shadow of the moon. That's crossing the United States. We have to keep in mind that, as we said earlier, that's 115 miles wide.
Right.
It's not a small. It's like you said before. It's not a laser beam. So if a particular town falls within that 115-mile range, it could be interesting, but it also could be very coincidental. So I don't make too much of that. In this scenario, in this case, yes, there's some interesting towns that are called Nineveh, and a connection to a town called, or a road called Salem, and these sort of things. So there is interest in my mind there. But it's not outside the realm of coincidence. And I'm not saying that it's just coincidence, but I will correct the record on a couple of things. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN is not starting up again on Monday, on the 8th. That's fake news. It started up again on the 8th of March. So it's been going for a month. Now, this is not a machine. It's the largest man-made machine on Earth that we know. That's disclosed. They don't switch it on and off with a button.
Right.
This is a very complex machine, potentially the most complex machine we've ever created as the human species. And so it's not uncommon for the LHC to be powered down for maintenance and things like this, and then gradually they power it up and go through all kinds of tests and reconfigure things. So they powered it up on the 8th of March, and it has been running since. Now, they're running tests. Like I said, they're calibrating. And again, this is an annual thing. This happens on and off for various reasons at CERN. And on April 8th, which just so happened to coincide with the eclipse, the plan was to begin their scheduled stable beam collisions at a slightly elevated voltage. So they're amping up the voltage, and they're getting back on their scheduled collisions on the 8th. So that's a little bit less extraordinary than they're turning CERN back on the 8th of April to correspond with the eclipse, as if this is some sort of a coordinated event. I don't believe it is, because the thing's been running for a month.
Right.
And in addition, there's a good chance that the Large Hadron Collider won't even be running on the 8th, because they have there are accesses and cryogenics tests that they've planned for Monday, for the 8th, which are going to bring it offline.
Right.
And so there's a good chance that the collider at this point won't even be running on the 8th. So that whole thing, I think, is fake news. It's an interesting coincidence that they're testing and they're amping up within the window of time when this eclipse is happening. But eclipses happen all the time.
Right.
So it's not, it's probably going to happen again that something like this falls on the date of an eclipse. So I wouldn't make too much of that. That certainly has been overblown. People go crazy with CERN.
Right.
Okay, people go crazy with CERN, and I get it. It's almost, it almost invites conspiracy theories. The way where CERN is located and the things that they've done, like that celebration, that inaugural celebration that they had, that freak show thing that they did with the
total
tunnel.
Freak show.
Yeah. Yeah, why did they do that? I mean, are they just rubbing that? Are they just rubbing this pagan stuff in Christians' faces?
Right. They have Shiva outside waving at us, and
you'll remember that, like in, I think it was 2016, they did that. There was that, like that satanic ritual that was filmed in front of the Shiva thing. I think we were all punked on that. I never believed it, so I wasn't. But many of my colleagues were taken by that. They did that. They wanted that to go viral. That was orchestrated by the particle physics geeks who live in the dorms around that statue. I was there. I was at CERN. I was actually there with L.A. Marsuli and Russ Dizdar. And I, having interfaced with some of these CERN interns and the particle physicists and going to the site myself, I'm absolutely convinced that event was staged, and the purpose of it was for it to go viral and to basically punk the conspiracy community into thinking it's real.
Kind of where we are now.
To some extent,
a lot of people are now.
To some extent, they're taking advantage of the hysteria that was. Right. And I've made videos. I've made a video on CERN years ago, in the series of videos called the Alberino Analysis, and I talk about CERN, and I do subscribe to the things I said in that video. So I do think that there is some kind of occult agenda behind CERN, but you're talking of 1% maybe of the people that have anything to do with CERN would be in the know.
Correct.
For that kind of conspiracy. 99% of the people that work at CERN are particle physicists.
Right.
And are maintenance people and are interns in various fields. And they know nothing about any of this, and they don't care. They're there because they are particle physicists, and it's a employment, and it's exciting to them. So, people think that they have this conception about CERN. If you go there, you're going to see like all kinds of satanic symbolism, and it's going to be apparent that they're trying to open up a gate to hell or something, which is the furthest thing from the truth. CERN is a very boring place, and you can take the tour, which we did, and you can see all the different projects that they're working on, and everything they're trying to accomplish, and again, it's all very boring.
Right.
It's fascinating in regard to the quantum mechanics and what they're looking for, but it's boring in terms of the actual facility in the atmosphere. It's very boring.
Well, I think you could probably pull in NASA at the same time. You brought that up before. They're shooting 3 rockets theoretically on April 8th at the moon.
Not necessarily. NASA's launching 3 rockets or a series of rockets to survey the solar eclipse to collect data.
Right.
Specifically during the solar eclipse. And what's causing this stir is that the project is called, it's designated APEP, A-P-E-P, an acronym.
Right.
And it stands for the atmospheric perturbations around eclipse path.
Right.
Now, in typical NASA fashion, the name is purposely, they chose this acronym because it's purposely associated with mythology, in this case, Egyptian mythology. NASA always does this. They either use Greek mythology or Roman mythology or Egyptian mythology to name everything that they do, all their projects. Of course, the most famous one would be the Apollo missions, which was the Roman sun god Apollo. All our planets are named after Greek deities and the moons that those planets have and so forth. So this is not something new that NASA's doing. But APEP happens to be and NASA says this themselves, that APEP is named after the serpent deity of ancient Egyptian mythology, who was a nemesis of the sun deity Ra. So obviously they chose a name that relates to a solar eclipse, because the snake eating the sun, so that it gobbles up the sun for a period of time, the sun goes dark.
Right.
This is what NASA does. Now, having said that, are there occult roots in regard to the establishment of NASA? Yes, there are. Anybody who knows anything about Aleister Crowley and one of his acolytes, one of his most important acolytes, Jack Parsons, knows that the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, named after Jack Parsons, really initiated by him, founded by him, at the very least inspired by him. Most people are now familiar that Jack Parsons was an acolyte of Aleister Crowley, and was performing sex magic and different kinds of rituals, which he was correlating with his work, right? So, yes, there are. NASA does have occult roots. That's indisputable, and they also have Nazi roots.
Right.
Operation Paperclip, we brought over prominent rocket scientists, Nazi rocket scientists. Werner von Braun, for example, was one of the most famous ones, if not the most famous one. But he was one of many. We brought them over, and they became the ground level in regard to the scientists for our own rocket program,
right?
Which ultimately became NASA, right? So, yes, there are occult and Nazi roots to NASA. That's true. That's not a conspiracy. That's a fact. But that it does not therefore follow that everybody at NASA even knows about any of that or is involved in some sort of an occult conspiracy, or that everything NASA does and says is a lie. That would be a logical fallacy. We need to have a much more higher resolution understanding of perspective of these things and realize that whereas NASA is probably a dog and pony show, most certainly is a dog and pony show, it is not an organization that just lies about everything it does. It is an organization that's being used as a cover for a secret space program. But that secret space program is not within the purview of NASA. It's within the purview of the military-industrial complex,
right,
and the private aerospace contractors. NASA, in my estimation, when we went to the moon, and yes, I do believe we went to the moon, what we found there was so extraordinary. It was immediately the moon and going to the moon and moon exploration was immediately taken out of the public, the purview of the public organization, NASA, and became the sole prerogative of the military-industrial complex, of the military.
Right.
So, and the reason is because of what we found there, and because of the secrets because we had a secret to keep, let's say.
Right.
And you don't keep secrets in public.
That might be a whole nother episode there, huh?
Well, you have to have a front organization, a cover NASA,
right,
that's doing public, legitimate stuff.
Right.
But they're not exploring the moon anymore. They pretend to be exploring the moon, but they're not directly involved in those kinds of operations anymore because that is now in the purview of the military-industrial complex.
Well, that brings in another, highlight of what we're talking about. It's obviously the eclipse, which is lunar. So obviously it's about the moon and everything that you're talking about, like with NASA going to the moon, fake moon landing. Was it real? Was it fake? The whole 9 yards. We could obviously talk about that all day in the videos where you're saying maybe some of that stuff was just to kind of keep the people quiet what they're actually doing on the other side.
Yeah, this is a solar eclipse, not a lunar eclipse.
Right.
A solar eclipse is when the moon comes between the sun and the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so it blocks out. It's really remarkable that this happens, actually.
Right.
Because the moon and sun have to be exactly positioned properly to do
right,
this, which is almost inconceivable, really, that it would have, through natural processes, ended up this way. That the moon, the distance from the Earth and its size, would perfectly block out the sun. That is extraordinary in and of itself.
Yeah.
And I think that points very clearly to design. But that's what's occurring here is that the moon is blotting out the sun, and you get that's called totality when it's completely blocking it, and you get this shadow cast by the moon on the Earth, and that's that 15-mile wide band.
Right.
That all of these towns with interesting names fall inside of this time. So anyway, having said all that, I think that there are some interesting things in regard to this eclipse. There are obviously interesting things happening in the world right now while this eclipse is happening, but eclipses happen all the time.
Right.
So I think we need to be I think it's something certainly to pay attention to, but at the same time, I caution people to avoid the hysteria and certainly to liberate themselves of conspiracy psychosis, to automatically assume that everything that's happening is some sort of grand conspiracy.
Right. Yeah.
And thereby lose contact with reality.
Right.
Because reality, I'll give you, we were talking about NASA, so a huge portion of the internet, the YouTube community, let's say, believes that everything NASA says is a lie. Well, that's a disconnect with reality. Mm-hmm. You've lost connection with reality if that's actually what you believe. I knew growing up, my father was a pastor in Cleveland, Ohio, and growing up in his church, we would meet some very interesting people who were part of the church. And and there was a particular individual who was a NASA scientist, who was a member of the church, and he was good friends with my dad and our family. And he worked at the John Glenn NASA Center, which is in Cleveland, connected to the Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. And it's a very important place for NASA. They do a lot of experimentation and all kinds of stuff there. And this individual was designing, his job was to design experiments related to liquids in space. So he would design the experiments and then would send the experiment up to the International Space Station, right? So that the astronauts could run the experiment. And this was his job, and he would always talk to us about the interesting things he's designing and what they're testing and what happened. And this is a Christian guy who we knew very well, and he was obviously working for NASA and obviously designing these legitimate, real experiments for zero gravity environment using liquids. This is what he was doing. Right. And this was back in the 90s, before social media, before the internet, really. Right. So, those kinds of experiments and scientific queries are happening. Those things are happening at NASA. They're doing real scientific work in regard to testing theories in zero gravity and building stuff and sending it up to the International Space Station. All of that's happening. And it's legitimate scientific work being done by legitimate scientists, right? So that's a high-resolution view of NASA. It's a real organization doing legitimate scientific work, and most of it, they're being completely honest about most of what they're doing. Most of what they're doing. So
key word right there.
You can hold the view, which is, again, a high-resolution view. A low-resolution view is NASA lies, everything they do is a lie. That's stupid. That's an ignorant, stupid view. And I'm sorry, but only ignorant people hold it. If you have a high-resolution view, you'll be able to say, you'll be able to recognize that this is an organization that's very complex with all different kinds of people in it. And a lot of the people who work there are just legitimate scientists and engineers and so forth, and they're working on real stuff. And they're putting these experiments together, and they're sending them up to the International Space Station, and, this is what they're doing. And all of that is legitimate, and all of that is real, and they're not lying to us about any of that. But then you cross over into the question of, did we go to the moon, and what did we find there? Okay, now you're going to run into some intentional obfuscation of the facts and the realities. And does NASA ever detect UFOs? Now you're going to run into some blatant lying from NASA, for sure.
Right.
For sure. And they have to lie. The government would never allow NASA to tell the truth about that sort of thing, because NASA is, to some extent, is a subsidiary of the United States government.
Right.
And so there's a larger narratives that you won't get the truth out of NASA. Mm-hmm. But when you get to the day-to-day function, the routine the routine operations happening at NASA, this is just an organization doing what it purports to do. And so and the reason why I bring that up is because this is a good demonstration of conspiracy psychosis. If you have a reaction now, whenever you see anything out of NASA and your reaction is that can't be true. Why? Because the NASA said because it's coming from NASA. Then you have conspiracy psychosis. that's the reality. And I'm more concerned with that than I am the eclipse.
Right.
And that's becoming rampant now post 2020. Conspiracy psychosis it's infected. It's like, Elon Musk talks about the woke mind virus. Well, this would be the conspiracy mind virus.
There you go.
And I subscribe to a lot of conspiracies. Okay, I'm the guy that believes in aliens and UFOs and giants and all that kind of stuff. But I don't have conspiracy psychosis. I would, at least, I hope I don't. And I always seek for a higher resolution view of everything, which is going to lead to complexity. And some people don't like complexity. They like everything to be simple, black and white, good and evil. But nothing is like that. You're not even like that. People aren't like that, right? So organizations, therefore, certainly are not like that. And I don't care what organization it is. The Vatican, right? The Pentagon, NASA are full of good, authentic, honest people and really bad people.
Right.
All of these organizations are full of, they're complex, right? Except for except for, human trafficking organizations. Those are just a bunch of scumbags.
Right.
Drug traffickers. Those are just a bunch, the cartels.
Right.
That's pretty black and white. But all these other organizations are complex.
Right.
Are complex. And so, and I don't know why I went down that path, but the point is, the conspiracy is that these rockets that NASA is launching are being choreographed to coincide with CERN turning that power switch on to a new level of power, and the rockets are going, and the solar eclipse is happening, and it's all coordinated to open a portal or something, or open the gates of hell or something like that. And is that possible? I suppose it's possible.
Would it be that easy though?
Well, it's just the facts don't line up. I mean, it's if CERN were suddenly turning a switch on, maybe you could make that case, but CERN's been on for a month.
Right.
So it's just that is a leap too far. And a lot of this eclipse stuff was generated by a few videos on YouTube and social media, and then people went to those videos and picked the information and created their own videos, and it sort of just escalates from there. And one of these videos was produced by a guy named Jim Staley, who his video has 3.6 million views or something now. And it's all about all these connections, all these connections to biblical references to the eclipse and all of this stuff. And there are more than a few inaccuracies in there, first of all, and then also, if some of these connections that he's presenting are real, then yeah, you might have something interesting, and I'm totally open to that. There are some very interesting things coinciding here. So
just so I can kind of sum up what the audience is kind of thinking, and your thought process is they're kind of blowing this out of proportion, and that, in reality, it might just be a nothing burger. There's a lot of coincidences. NASA's doing some tests. CERN at that point may or may not be turning that switch on. And at the end of the day, we're all still going to be here the next day.
The 8th of April will come and go like any other day.
It'll come and go. It's kind of like the Y2K.
Y2K, the blood moon hype
2012,
2012. We've seen this movie how many times now?
Yeah.
And back in 2012, you'll recall, all these different things seem to correlate to the Mayan prophecies. And, right? All these things in these videos, dozens and dozens and dozens, probably thousands of videos were made about what's going to happen in 2012. Same thing about Y2K, except there was no social media back in the Y2K days. But the 2012 is a great example of conspiracy psychosis.
World's going to end.
It's just all these biblical correlations and all these feast days and this and that. Same thing. the same thing, and then the blood moons, and it just doesn't end. It doesn't end, and people take advantage. People take advantage of this stuff. That's why I retract when I see things like this blowing up on social media. It's sort of I retract in disgust, actually, because it's easy. It's an easy way to accrue subscribers for people who are on social media and who are attempting to get more eyeballs on their content. This is a really easy way to do it. You take something that's already blowing up, or that has the potential to blow up because it has all these right elements and it has to do with some sort of a phenomenon that's about to happen, and you connect these dots, and then it gets, you can break it up and make a TikTok video out of it, and that gets passed around on Facebook. And at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning, what's going to happen on April 8th? Nothing, except for these people are going to have hundreds of thousands of more subscribers to their social media channels.
Right.
That will be the result. And in some cases, some of these people are unsavory characters. So I would make too much of it, but it is eclipses. Now, I will say that eclipses and the precession of the equinox, right, and the phases of the moon and all of these things are important. We're important to the ancients. We're exceedingly important to the ancients, and do connect to biblical prophecy, for sure. Both and connect to prophecy in ways that are, I think, we haven't even understood yet. Prophecies and I'm talking outside of the book of Revelation. So I'm not discounting that at all. That's why I keep saying it is interesting. I'm not discounting that there might be something prophetic here.
But I know, too, you're kind of working on one of your own new books, correct?
I have several things going in that realm, yeah.
Right. That probably lead into more of these aspects, especially astrology, timing of certain events that you might not go into detail right now, but we would love to have you back on the show to talk further about those new books that you got coming.
Well, I talk about every now and again. There's certain things that I've discovered in the biblical text that definitely have astronomical associations that are very fascinating that most people probably miss. And I would say there's dozens and dozens of them that we've all missed.
Right.
Even as I say all the time, even in the depiction of cherubim, for example.
Right.
Right. The four faces of the cherubim corresponding to the Mazzaroth, corresponding to the zodiac, the cardinal directions of the zodiac, and so forth. These kinds of things happen. These kinds of things are part of the prophetic corpus of the Bible, and are a part of that prophetic iconography.
Right.
And so I accept that. And there may, as I keep saying, there may be a prophetic significance to this eclipse. I grant some of these videos and posts I've seen on social media, I grant that there are some things that appear to be more than coincidental. I grant all of that. But at the same time, there is a lot of fake news here.
Right.
So, again, I just would encourage people to try and have high-resolution view when you see something come across. This is going to happen again, right? This is going to happen again. When we see this happen again.
2044 to be exact.
Whatever. And I'm not just talking about the eclipse. I'm talking about something is going to come along,
right,
and everybody's going to freak out on social media, and we all get a little dumber when that happens. We do. And,
right.
and
makes sense.
So I just encourage people to have a high-resolution view, embrace the complexity of these kinds of things, be wary of claims that seem extraordinary, and understand that almost invariably there's going to be a whole lot of hyperbole involved because people want to increase their social media following.
Right.
This is the age we live in. And, there's people they'll jump on these keyword search terms, the eclipse and Bible prophecy and Nephilim and all these. They'll jump on these search words and create content and try and expand that content just because they know it's going to draw eyeballs, right?
Right.
Which that doesn't, and that's why I said when these things happen, we all collectively become a little dumber, because the objective usually isn't to be objective and scientific and really scrutinize the data and see if we're getting this right. The objective is to increase your followers. That's the objective behind most of these social media posts. Just keep that in mind. When you're watching one of these viral social media posts, the objective is not to tell you something that's factually true. It's to get your eyeballs glued to that account and to become a subscriber. Instill
that fear.
Well, that's right. I mean, fear sells.
Sucks you in.
Yeah.
Right.
Fear sells. And it keeps you going back to the same web pages where you get your end of the world information from. It sells. It motivates. And that's one of the things that's driving all of this. But that's my
that's your take on it.
That's my analysis.
Hey, I like it. The Timothy analysis. I mean, the
Alberino analysis, that's actually my members' community. And I talked about the eclipse in greater detail than this today.
Right.
On my members' platform. But
I agree. And is there any shout outs that you want to give maybe and tell people where they can find you?
Well, I did just launch a members' platform, which is the alberinoanalysis.com. And it's a subscription platform, and I'm doing weekly private briefings. Going to be doing Q&A live stream sessions. 3 of my films, I think. Have you seen my films that I've been working on for all these years? I don't know if you have or not, but I've got 3 episodes in a TV series that hasn't been published yet, that people who sign up.
You told me they were coming, but I have not seen them yet.
Well, I'll have to show this to you.
That's exciting.
The people who sign up for the annual subscription in my membership, on my membership platform, will get access as part of that subscription to these 3 films. They're 3 full-length films and series. It's 3 episodes in a TV series that nobody has seen yet except for my members.
Wow.
So you get an advanced screening of those episodes if you become an annual member to the Alberino Analysis.
Gotcha.
Members community. So that's really exciting, and I'm focusing a lot of attention on that. But
and I know you've got a strong following on YouTube as well. So our audience that's watching now, where can they find you on YouTube?
Just my name, Timothy Alberino, on YouTube, and on Twitter. What
are the areas that you kind of cover?
Instagram. I talk about all things fringe, really. I talk about Bible prophecy, theories and alternative history, the mystery of the megalith builders, the mythologies of ancient giants, UFO phenomenon.
Very cool.
And everything in between. Most of that content's on my YouTube channel, but I'm also on social media, as I said, Twitter and Instagram. Always the same handle, @Timothy Alberino.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate you coming down here, Tim, and giving us a little more enlightenment about April 8th and knowing that, you know what, April 9th will come right after April 8th and
nothing will change.
Nothing will change.
And if something does change, then we're going to look really stupid.
We're going to look really stupid, but you know what? It was stated here first. So
something will change. Inevitably, something is going to happen. It's just probably not the end of the world.
Right. Right. It's not going to be as exaggerated as they're making it out to be.
No, certainly not. So, again, I want to say as the final point here, I'm not saying there's nothing to this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's nothing to a lot of this stuff.
Right.
But there is perhaps something very significant,
right,
in relationship to this particular eclipse and the path that it's taking through the United States and its connection, its correlation to things that are happening in the world right now. Right. So I'm totally open to that. I just want to make that clear. I'm totally open to that.
Be aware, but don't be scared.
Yeah, and don't be stupid.
And don't be stupid. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on down here, Tim.
Yeah.
And,
it was nice. I just had to get in my truck and drive over here because we live in the same town. So
it's great. Well, stay tuned for the next one. This is Alden Antonucci and Timothy Alberino at Extreme Power Hour Podcast. Stay tuned for the next.